Different. So you watched the first debate?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so impressions or what? How did you report on that debate for those who might not have read your piece on it?
Yeah, I mean, our sort of approach is not to try to sort of identify a winner. It's more sort of to try to document what happened and what was said. I mean, it was interesting because you had two of the leaders sort of on the defensive through the whole thing, because you had Horvath and Wynne attacking Ford, and Ford and Horvath attacking Wynne for her record. So Andrea Horvath essentially was sort of left more or less kind of unscathed. And I think if you were to declare a winner in that debate, it could arguably be her. Mm-hmm. But I think partly just because she was always on the offensive or positively promoting her own policies, and not really having to defend anything herself, as opposed to the other two leaders. I was surprised. It was a very scrappy debate. They're often sort of talking over each other, and it got, I wouldn't say angry, but sort of quite heated at times.
And it was a bit odd in that the three of them were standing the whole time.
Yes.
And we could see in behind them these chairs with a writing surface, like student desks almost, that maybe they thought originally they'd have them sit there, and I guess as soon as one of them stands up, the other two kind of have to, because it was a bit strange. I did see Horvath get a lot of credit in the online commentary because the format was to invite questions from the audience, obviously pre-screened questions. And, I think Ford and Wynne were accused a little bit of kind of pivoting, in media training. Don't answer the question that was asked, answer the question that you want to be asked. But the Horvath actually got some credit for answering the question that the audience member asked. And I think she scored some points on that.
Yeah, no, I think I would generally agree, and I think, especially Ford and to a lesser extent Wynne, I think did do a lot of sort of pivoting to the talking points they wanted to get out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue about what, sort of the value of having those sort of audience questions, and which may or may not be the issues of the day that are relevant to a wider group of people, but if you're going to have them, I think you should be answering the questions.
I thought Cynthia Mulligan did a good job of moderating. I wasn't crazy about the format. I felt like I was watching a kind of disjointed. Now we're over here, and now we're over there, and almost like I felt like when CNN covers election night. They go to the big board and the guy moves numbers and maps around. So that's fair. So beyond the debate, then this week we've seen a number of planks unveiled by Doug Ford. He talked about a middle-class tax cut. He talked about, earlier on he had referenced a corporate tax cut, $5 billion in transit. And all of that is out there, and of course the other parties' war rooms immediately start to shoot down whatever their opponent puts out there, which is the way these things are run. So as a reporter, can you get influenced or swayed by what the war rooms put out, or you're a human, do you just kind of focus in on what that particular leader announced and kind of set aside all of the spin that comes out of the opposing war rooms?
No, I mean, I think it's somewhere sort of in between. I mean, you don't want to just parrot whatever the leader is saying on that particular day. Not by any means. You want to, at least we at the Post want to sort of analyze what they are putting out there, and that would include looking at what the other parties are saying, and if it's. But you got to sort of judge whether their critique is reasonable or not, and not simply report it because they're saying it, and it could possibly, they could be onto something, it could be a legitimate sort of critique and a flaw they've identified in whatever policy the other party is putting out there. So I mean, that stuff can be valuable, but I think you got to take it with a grain of salt and not just sort of parrot it.
Yeah, fair enough. And I don't know if I was interested or intrigued or entertained, but the other day, someone from the media, when Doug Ford made an announcement, the announcement was, I think about transit. It was not about legislative process. And one of the reporters, I would not ask you to critique a colleague
Sure.
in media, for sure, but one of the reporters asked him, kind of out of the blue, how does a bill get passed in the Ontario legislature? And Doug Ford didn't take that well. He called it a gotcha question, and I see you smiling over there, and don't worry about it, we're going to pass lots and lots and lots of bills. Is it important, do you think, if the election is a job interview, that 14 million people are looking at these three people and say, okay, we're going to hire one of you to be our premier. Is it important that a party leader, a potential premier, be able to describe first reading, second reading, debate, committee, clause by clause? Is that important?
I mean, I think it's probably somewhat important that they at least have a sort of a general sense of what that process is, just because it sort of indicates that that they've followed provincial politics and know essentially how the system works. Because if you want to be premier, you have to sort of work the system and in order to get things done. Yeah, I mean, not to criticize that question, I don't think I would have asked that, or at least I think if you're going to ask that, maybe ask all three leaders and do a story sort of on what their responses were. I think one could argue, perhaps it's a little bit patronizing asking, singling out Doug Ford to ask that question. That said, I think it is important that party leaders know this stuff.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. So one is, they have limited his media availability, and I think it's 5 or 6 minutes, a very limited number of questions before he exits. And so I think from the media's perspective, we have to use whatever questions we have, whatever time they allow us to ask maybe about the thing that he announced that day. But I think it was kind of strange. How do you take it as a reporter when you're told, come to this event, come and cover it, so leave your office, your home, wherever you happen to be, to cover this event, and then the party leader, whoever it is, makes their announcement and kind of cuts off questions. Do you feel hard done by? Do you feel like that's wrong, that they should limit that kind of question time?
I mean, I certainly don't take it personally, but I think, I think it's surprising when, especially when an opposition leader, restricts some media questioning to the extent that Doug Ford has. I mean, normally, you expect the opposition politicians to sort of be standing out there and taking as many questions as they can and getting as much time and sort of in the limelight as they possibly can. So it's a bit surprising in that sense that he has limited questions. And I mean, I think, the more questions get to sort of having the leader explain their policies better and how they would work and how they would be paid for, that kind of thing. So, I mean, absolutely, those more questions are valuable in terms of producing a better story about whatever their person is, the leader is announcing. Of course, it's their right to take as many or as few questions as they want. And I would say, perhaps sadly, as a journalist, that what I've noticed over time is the public doesn't seem to really care that much about when media is restricted in their coverage of politicians. It doesn't seem to be an issue that resonates with the public, unfortunately.
Is that because people feel like through the use of the internet that they have kind of unfettered access in their phone, at their desk, whenever they want it, that they rely less on traditional reporting? Is because I would think as a function of democracy, I don't have the ability to attend every event that the three party leaders do. I don't have the ability to go and sit and watch every bill get passed. So I depend on media to tell me what's happening. Right. So you would think that as in a democracy, it would be more important. People might get more riled up about it, but sadly you're saying that people don't seem to be bothered by this lack of access.
I mean, that's my impression. I mean, I've never seen any, polling on that, but that's the impression I have. And I mean, perhaps it's just that people see this as kind of like a, sort of an inside baseball issue for the media, and just we don't care how you do your job, just do it, and make the best of what you're offered. And I think some people see the media as being sort of almost antagonistic towards politicians, and don't begrudge the politicians sort of limiting their exposure to the media reporters. But yeah.
So I saw the same reporter who asked that question. I follow him on Twitter, and not from the Liberal or NDP war room, but from him, that same reporter, I saw a YouTube video from the 2014 mayor's campaign, where Doug Ford and John Tory, who ultimately won and became mayor, are sitting at at a table like this, and Doug Ford asked John Tory a similar question. Do you know which committee of council handles procurement? And of course, Tory didn't, and Ford said, well, do you know how many committees we have at all? And Tory kind of struggled with it a bit. So I guess, is that a, goose and gander thing? Like, why is it okay for you to ask? Because he had the advantage having been on council, but it's not okay for us to ask you how the government that you purport to lead actually works?
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean that certainly does add legitimacy to that question, and he's a very good young reporter who asked that question. So I have a lot of respect for him. But yeah, I mean, and that's I hadn't seen that YouTube video myself. So yeah, in that sense, I think it does give a bit more legitimacy to asking that question of Ford. So,
yeah, I was surprised that I saw it from the reporter, not from Liberal or NDP war.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.